Hey, aloha, and welcome to Aloha Friday, Stan the Energy Man on my lunch hour. I'm Stan Osterman. I work down for the state of Hawaii, down at HCAT, the Hawaii Center for Advanced Transportation Technologies. But I have to tell you, the comments that I make aren't necessarily the express the opinions of HCAT or HCDC or DBED or the governor or the legislature or anybody else. It's just little old me. So I have a new Aloha shirt on today. You can tell that I bought it because when it's really nice, everybody tells me how nice the Aloha shirt is. I've had no comments today, so this is my choice. I have pretty good taste, I think. So if you like my shirt, let me know. We tried getting a hold of President Obama on the way into Hawaii today, but unfortunately we're not able to raise Air Force One. So we'll have to forego his comments to a little bit later, but I'm sure he'd like to talk to us and maybe want to be on our show next week while he's here visiting in Hawaii. But just shy of the president, we have a great guest today talking to us on Skype, and this is my first Skype show, so I hope I don't mess it up. We have Kelly King from Pacific Biodiesel. She's based over on Maui, and she's here to talk to us about, like the title of the show is, You Want Energy with Those Fries? Because what she does is she takes otherwise unusable fuels and oils and turns them into energy for vehicles and farm equipment and things like that. So Kelly, thanks for being with us on Skype on Stan the Energy Man today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Stan. I'm happy to fill in for President Obama.
No, you're a suitable substitute by any stretch of the imagination. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started doing the kind of work that you do and into the business that, I mean, nobody just starts off with creating a huge biodiesel company right off the bat. So give us a little bit of background on how you got into it and what got you headed into Pacific Biodiesel.
Okay, well, we started out as a small biodiesel company on Maui, and my husband's previous business and occupation was in diesel mechanics. So we had a little shop called King Diesel. We were the Cummins engine dealership for Maui County, and he did engine repair and sales and maintenance and all that. And while maintaining the generators at the Central Maui landfill, he heard a lot of complaints about the used cooking oil going into the landfill and all the grease fires that would happen, the leaching through the liner of the used cooking oil, which had a potential to poison our groundwater. And so he started, around this time, the internet became available to the public. And that's when he started doing a lot of research on what could possibly be used. He knew there was a connection between cooking oil and diesel fuel. And so he started researching and found a research project at the University of Idaho where they were trying to make a connection between used cooking oil and fuel use and fuel production. We partnered with those folks over there and brought one of the researchers to Maui and built the first biodiesel plant in America that was using used cooking oil. And we, there was a lot of research that went into it because we had to research how much used cooking oil was actually available on the island of Maui, commercial oil, and try to size it to no bigger than that because that was the feedstock. But Hannah Steele, who was our recycling coordinator back then, for the county of Maui, was extremely helpful, gave us a place at the landfill to set up. And because none of us knew really what it entailed, we actually weren't required to get any permits until 10 years later after the plant had been running for 10 years. But we started taking French fryer oil from the restaurants and the food establishments and making fuel. And it really was started as a recycle project to try to figure out how we could keep this messy oil out of the landfill and also relate it to the diesel engine work that Bob was doing. And it kind of grew from there. We realized, as hard as it was back in 1995, to explain to people what this new fuel was and that, yes, it would work in their diesel engine. We've been pushing that rock up the hill all these years, and now we're at a point where the technology has advanced and the fuel quality has advanced to be able to be put into the newer diesel engines and help clean up even above the technology in the engines to make it even cleaner fuel with less emissions. And it's become more about the fuel now than the recycling, but certainly our favorite feedstock is the waste oils because we're able to keep those out of the landfill.
Yeah, and your operation actually fills step number one that I say is part of any renewable energy project or any energy project whatsoever, which is to make yourself efficient. What we're doing is when you take a product that would normally be dumped into the landfill and you turn it into another energy product, you're basically helping with our efficient use of limited resources.
Right.
Every gallon of diesel fuel, biodiesel fuel that you make means one less gallon of diesel oil we import from outside the state. And that every time we import, we're losing tax revenues, we're losing jobs, we're losing money. But when we take otherwise throwaway commodities and turn them into usable energy for the citizens of Hawaii, we're doing great things for Hawaii. So, hats off to you and the company and your husband for starting the company. 20 years, I understand. Your birthday?
20 years. We're actually the oldest biodiesel company in America now, and seen a lot of other companies come and go. We don't get real consistent support from the federal government or the state government to date. And so it's been a real roller coaster ride in this industry.
Well, hats off to you because, you're one of those true entrepreneurs, you and your husband, and I guess it's a family business. Your son's even involved in it, that you step out and you take the chance and you get your own funding and your own bank loans and reach out and find the technology and the folks that know about the technology and start from scratch. That's a real entrepreneur spirit, and that's the kind of thing that I know that we really look for in HCAT and HTDC, and the thing we're hoping that will bring the future of Hawaii into the high-tech world and new jobs for the folks in Hawaii with great products like Pacific Biodiesel. So let's talk about a little bit about your customers. Who are some of your customers with Pacific Biodiesel?
Well, one of our longest and largest customers is the city and county of Honolulu. So all of their diesel fleets run on 20% biodiesel and have for about 10 years now. And they've been consistent in their usage because part of their goal in using biodiesel was to also keep the grease on their island out of the landfill. So when the first contracts were written by the city and county, they actually specified that the biodiesel in the B20 had to be made from used cooking oil from their island. And so we were very specific to make sure that we knew how much of that we were making. And now they're a little looser on it because they know it's coming from all islands. And also we reached the ceiling of biodiesel sales with used cooking oil. So we're expanding into biofuel crops in order to meet demand. But we've got it in the County of Hawaii just started on it in April with their fleets, and so the Haleon bus and all the fleets that they have that are diesel are running on biodiesel. And we have marine applications. All the Arizona Memorial shuttles are running on 20% biodiesel. And we have at least one or two charter boats on every island, every one of the 4 islands that are running on 100% biodiesel, which is great for the divers because when you're jumping off the back end of a dive boat, you don't want to smell those diesel fumes or see the oily slick from the diesel fuel. And so it's a lot healthier for the divers and the snorkelers. We also have a lot of fleets, local fleets. All of the electric company, MECO, HECO, and HELCO run all of their fleets on biodiesel. And there's other fleets like the Maui Disposal, Maui Recycling Group, the Honolulu Disposal. I could go on, but some of the big fleets, DHX on Maui is right now trying to turn their fleet over to 100% biodiesel. So it's catching on. The quality of the new refinery, the fuel coming out of the new refinery has everybody very excited because it's very clear. It looks just like diesel fuel, and it's actually a better quality fuel overall than regular diesel anyway. So we've been getting a much better response since the new refinery has been producing.
That's awesome. So basically, do you actually do most of the refining for Oahu on Maui and ship the feedstock from Honolulu to Maui and then ship the final product back, or do you have a plant on Oahu as well?
No, actually, all the refining is right now is done on the Big Island at Big Island Biodiesel, and so all the oil gets shipped over there. And that level of plant that we built over there has a nameplate capacity of 5.5 million gallons a year. But the same plant that we built with that same footprint in Oregon is actually now producing about 7 million gallons a year. So there is a potential to go beyond nameplate, and especially if we get more virgin oil. So the idea is that once we get the fuel crops going on the Big Island and we can feed the Big Island biodiesel plant with 100% oil from those crops, And we could start looking at where we want to put the next biodiesel plant, and probably be on Oahu, because the demand is there. And then push all the used cooking oil into that until we get crops going over there. But ideally, each island would have its own biodiesel refinery, and fed by feedstock on that island and selling the fuel back to that island. And that would be the absolute most sustainable, most efficient model that we could have for diesel fuel use in transportation.
Last week, when we were talking a little earlier before we came on the air, I talked to Heidi Kuhnle from her office in Manoa, and she was talking about making fuel from algae. And you mentioned that you were working with some algae stock yourself. Is that a new thing that you're doing, another sort of feedstock for you, or are you working with Heidi?
Well, it's a new thing we're doing, but we haven't really seen a huge amount of promise yet in algae to biofuel. And so the project we're working on is actually funded by the state Agribusiness Development Corporation. They came to us and asked us if we would get involved with their processing of algae. And the algae we're growing is for fish meal. So it will help feed the aquaculture industry in Hawaii. That's the big thing that's missing in aquaculture here is really the meal. And there are other types of meal we're looking at, the livestock for chickens and goats and pigs and cattle. So a mixture of some of the crops we're growing and the algae meal. And I'm hoping to get a grant to develop the different formulas for the different types of livestock. But the state had come to us a couple of years ago with this idea of growing algae off of waste papaya. And the project is actually to help the papaya farmers on the Big Island, because there's over 15 million pounds of waste papaya a year on the Big Island, because everything is grown for export over there. And if there's one little spot of color, meaning yellow, it gets thrown in the waste pile. Everything has to be green for export. And so they have a tremendous amount of waste papaya that is of no value unless we can turn it into something. So PBARC, the Pacific Basin Agriculture Research Center, started working on this 2 years ago, putting the papaya slurry into this algae model and growing the algae off the papaya. And so then they came to us and asked us if we would get involved in actually processing it on site. So that's a kind of an experiment demonstration project, but we've turned a corner. We've gotten success. We've grown our first and dried our first algae, and that's going to go into that's part of the food part of our food and fuel model. But it's all working kind of simultaneously, and it's all complementary types of processes. So we get involved wherever we feel like there's a need for some professional processing, some follow through, and that it adds to the sustainability model.
Great. Well, we've come up on about our first break here, but when we come back, I'd like to explore that a little bit more and talk about how we're more like an ecosystem now in the energy world than a specific product. And you kind of made a good lead into that. So we'll come back right after this break and talk to Kelly and get some more about the ecosystem of biodiesel.
To Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy on Wednesday. And we have Sharon Moriwaki, my co-host and co-chair of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And we have Warren Bohlmeyer today, a special guest with the Hawaii Renewable Energy Alliance, and also a member of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum.
In fact, he's our Renewable Energy Working Group Chair. So
he
takes care of all of our...
You ought to see him in song and dance, too. He does the musical part of the show. Sharon is more serious than that, but not much more serious. So anyway, what do you think of this show? I mean, is this good?
I think this is good. We hope it's good. We hope it attracts a lot more people than our forum, so that people can see what's going on in energy and clean energy, and call in, write in, tweet,
yeah, we
or
want
Twitter.
That. We want public engagement, civic engagement from everybody, because that's the only way we're going to get down the road on this, right, Warren?
Yeah, I think so, and it's an opportunity for guys like me to share a little bit of their mana'o and sometimes get the facts right. Who was that guy that said, just give me the facts, start with the facts and then worked from there. Oh, it was Dragnet guy, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Jack
That was when I
Brown.
was just,
Man.
I was just in
I
grade
oh,
school then.
remember
I
that?
barely
I was
remember
like,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just the facts,
Just a
man.
man.
Here on Hawaii, the state of clean energy, every Wednesday from 4 to 5. You'll see. Come back soon. Right, Sharon?
Right.
Whiteburn?
Yes.
Confused when I first was getting on because I
Hey,
saw.
welcome back to Stan the Energy Man. And we have with us today Kelly King from Pacific Biodiesel, coming to us all the way from her luxurious office space on Maui, and telling us about her company that's 20 years old this year, and started off as a family business and is still a family business, and the kind of high-tech business we like to see growing here in Hawaii. And before we went on the break, we talked a little bit about the diversity of products and feedstocks that is being used at Pacific Biodiesel and coming out of Pacific Biodiesel. So this segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because we've found as we talk to different companies that there's really a whole revolution in the energy side now that's looking more like, you can't be a one-trick pony. You can't just do one thing. You have to be able to not only get a feedstock and use it to make your product, but then any other pieces that are left over, you have to have a market for them and have some other company making something out of that product, and until everything's gone. Like I know that this is kind of a weird comparison, but in the piggery business and the folks that run piggeries, they'll tell you that every single piece of a pig is used. So when in the end there's nothing left, and that's kind of where we're going in the energy world now. Is we want to make sure that we use every single piece of energy that we can get out of any product. So if it's not used to make the fuel itself, then the byproduct could be used in a gasifier when it's dried or at the right moisture content level to make electricity and heat and things like that. So Kelly, tell us a little bit about your operations and how you kind of fit into that eco model for Pacific Biodiesel.
Okay, well, ours started with reaching the glass ceiling on the local commercial grease, because there's only so much used cooking oil and trap grease in the state of Hawaii. And, we don't want to go out there and advocate for people to eat more French fries and donuts. So we had to go into the field. We knew the next area we were going to look for feedstock was going to be in agriculture. And we've been successful in getting funding, federal funding, to do research and demonstration on biofuel crops. And we did some on Oahu for a few years. Now we're on the Big Island with sunflower. But part of that was building a demonstration scale crushing mill. And we built that to be able to crush some of the crops we're growing, and we can look at the quality of the oil for biodiesel, the quality of the meal for livestock, and how high the protein levels are. It turns out they're very high for things like safflower and sunflower, and starting to feed that into the cattle industry, and which is a huge lack here. There's no meal source for cattle, so that's a big niche to fill. And then also looking at the waste biomass as a potential gasification feedstock. But while we were doing that, when we were building the crushing mill, we actually had the macadamia nut processors start noticing the crushing mill going up and asking us if we could pick up their waste mac nuts. So we started crushing macadamia nuts, which we never thought in our wildest dreams we'd ever make into biodiesel, because we thought they were too expensive, not knowing that there's about 50% of the mac nuts grown on the Big Island are waste. They never make it to market. So we've been crushing that, sending the meal to the cattle industry to to experiment with how the cows like it. And in that, while we were doing that macadamia nut crushing, our crushing mill guys started researching macadamia nut oil and finding out that it's one of the best things you could put on your skin. It's really good it's very similar to the oil that we make in our own bodies that we stop making as we get older, and that's why we get wrinkled and dried and everything. And so this is a way to put that back in. It's a great anti-aging, anti-wrinkle oil. And so then we started getting into cold pressing, and we're actually cold pressing, and it's all 100% natural and organic process, and making oil now for a beauty product. Which is it's a smaller niche, but it's a higher value and higher margins. And hopefully that will get us through these struggling times when we have to compete with the lowest petroleum prices in a decade. You have to start looking at, like you said, you have to diversify, you have to be flexible if you're in the energy industry, or you're not going to survive. And so that's one of the products that we've developed recently in the past, when we had our old process of biodiesel technology, the byproduct, it turned out, was a really good soil amendment. And it also, kind of by the way, was an excellent apple snail abatement. So we started working with the taro farmers on that, and looking at how to amend the soil in the taro fields. I mean, this makes the soil really light and fluffy so it doesn't stick to your feet when you slosh through it. And it also has about a 90% kill rate with the apple snails. So we got an SBIR grant to develop that and do the environmental testing to make sure it wasn't killing anything else in the environment. And after 2 years of that project, we found out it wasn't even killing the mosquito larvae. It was the fact that the snails would actually be attracted to it because there's glycerin in it, and they would actually ingest it. So now we're starting to commercialize that product, and there's been a huge outbreak in KNI on Maui of apple snails that's just devastating the taro farmers. So it's kind of just in time, and the Department of Agriculture is actually helping to fund a huge, across the peninsula application so that all the farmers could use it at once and try to get rid of all the apple snails, because all their loei flow into each other. So if one gets rid of apple snails and then water's coming in from another one, then all the eggs flow in and the snails flow in. So that's another product, and that was a very serendipitous kind of just exploration, because one of our first biodiesel processors from Maui happened to be a taro farmer. And when he found out there was potassium in the byproduct, he started using it in his taro fields. And the first time he used it, all the apple snails floated to the surface upside down, and he got really, really excited. So those kinds of things, you look, if you're open and you look for those opportunities and you look for those ways that you can actually enhance life for other people, that we're living with, the farmers and the ranchers, and what are the needs here. There's so many needs to fill, and we just kind of keep open to that. And when they come along, we try to develop it if it makes sense. So far, we've gotten support on those projects from the state and the federal government.
Well, that's awesome, and it's exactly what I was talking about, that ecosystem and being able to diversify yourself a little bit and open up that aperture a little wider and get into other things. And like you say, the volatility of fossil fuels right now has a super direct impact on you in a bad way. When it gets cheap for everybody else, it gets bad for you.
Right.
And when it gets expensive for everybody else, it gets good for you. But you have to be able to do your cash flow in spite of all that.
Right, exactly. And it's bad for the environment when petroleum is cheap, because people go back to wasting fuel and driving big SUVs and not carpooling as much. And we really need to be vigilant about that if we're going to address climate change.
Well, it's also nice that your product is of a higher quality than the typical diesel fuel that folks buy. So do you ever do any blending, or any of the refineries looking at blending your product into theirs?
Yeah, we do a lot of that, and that's with the B20. B20 is 20% biodiesel and 80% petroleum. So we actually, at our pump station on Maui, the Pacific Biodiesel pump station, we sell 100%, and we also sell B20 at the pump. And a lot of the larger industrial fleets will go to B20 first till they get a comfort level that biodiesel is going to work the same and clean their engines out, and then they may transition, like DHX is transitioning to 100%. But there's a comfort level with B20 because it's widely accepted by the OEMs now. It's endorsed by the federal government, and it's considered a fuel. If you use anything less than 20%, you're really looking at an additive rather than a fuel type. So we're happy to be there. We're producing. If we just sold it on road and didn't have the farm equipment, the generators and the boats, we would be producing about 10% right now of the on-road diesel fuel that's used in the state of Hawaii. So we could support a 10% mandate if there was, if we ever got a mandate passed in the state.
That's a pretty significant chunk of the market. That's awesome.
Yeah.
On the new feedstock that you're looking at, the sunflower seeds. Off the top of your head, do you happen to know about how many acres of sunflower per how many gallons of fuel, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think we figured that we're getting really good results, better than we thought we would with the trials. And so if that holds true, we think we can feed the entire 5 million gallon productions with somewhere around 25,000 acres a year. and or maybe it's 30. But if you break that down into 3 crops a year, then what we're talking about is maybe 10 to 15,000 acres of land, and then we plant that 2.5 to 3 times a year because it's only a 100-day crop. So that's the beauty of the crops we're looking at, is they're very short term. You plant them, you harvest them, you heal the soil, then you plant again, and we can change from, if we get disease issues or pest issues, we can change from sunflower to safflower, or we can put in camelina, we're developing basically, a quiver full of different types of crops that we know that we can rotate around quickly and that will give different things back to the soil. So we won't be monocropping. And the other good thing about these quick crops is that it's much more attractive to landowners to give you a 5-year lease, and you can plant several different types of crops and then move on. A lot of landowners do not want to commit their land for 30 years to do a tree crop. Like, jatropha is another plant we're looking at, that's a tree crop. But that would take, we would want a minimum 30-year lease, because that's, 30 to 40 years is how long those trees last and will keep producing. But it's scary to a lot of landowners to commit land for that long.
Well, another tree that's on the Big Island in pretty good quantity is eucalyptus. I think they were planning on using it for paper products and exporting it as a raw material for paper. Does it have any potential use? It's a pretty oily tree. But that's the tree itself. Not any kind of nuts that come from it, but the basic tree. Have you looked at that at all, or that's just not a factor?
No, I think because eucalyptus oil has such a high value for, I've seen it used in really small quantities in spas, and a little vial of it will cost you $5 or $10. It's not something we really looked at to use in and there's no byproduct if we were to even crush the leaves and get oiled. The byproduct is biomass, and biomass doesn't need to be crushed to burn. So there's not the value in the meal that's left over. And for us, in order to make it economic, if we're going to take oil out of a seed or a nut, there has to be a value to the meal that's left over to help pay for the crop, for growing the crop. And so now we've got a tri-cropping model where we have oil for biodiesel, we have meal for the livestock, and then we have the leftover biomass, like the stems of the sunflower, that could be used for either fiber, or they're used in some applications almost like hemp fiber, but they can also be used as biomass for electricity.
Well, keep that option open, because that's a new niche for the Gucci best smelling diesel fuel.
Yes.
If you go with the eucalyptus in there, and you could get a whole new market going. That other nut that you mentioned, is that the one that somebody from the Energy Accelerator got a cohort with Energy Accelerator for one of those trees that produces a lot of oil from the nuts? Is that I didn't know that name of that tree you mentioned.
Jatropha is something different, but the folks you're talking about are Terviva folks, and they are working on a tree called Pongamia. Pongamia is a larger tree than Jatropha, and it has like really flat, large seeds, and then you take the inside out and crush it. And we actually are working with those folks. I was one of their sponsors on that Energy Accelerator grant that they got, but they haven't gotten to the point where they actually have any production off of it to be able to crush. But we're waiting for the first. Probably going to take another couple of years before they get the first production off. And that's one of the issues with tree crops as well, that many of them take between 3 and 7 years. Kahului takes almost 7 years to produce its first nuts. And I don't know any farmers who want to wait 7 years to get income off their land. So that's why we need the federal government to help with some of these experimental, why the Terviva guys needed a grant, why we got a grant for Jatropha. But the beauty of the land crops is that you can have production within the first 100 days, and then rotate crops around. So we're trying to keep, we've got experiments going on both sides, and we're thinking we're going to have a good mix of different types of crops. Jatropha, we're still looking for a byproduct, but we partnered with SG Biofuels that has developed something like 37 hybrids. And we've actually planted, with funding from Ulupono, we planted a few acres of SG Biofuels crops, and we're working with them. They're their trees are actually producing about twice as fast as normal jatropha trees and about twice as much. So it's looking like that might bring jatropha back into the mix as a biofuel crop. And so we're trying to stay open to everything, and we're trying to also be partners with everybody who wants to be in this space, because our philosophy is if we all work together, we can make everybody's boat float higher instead of, one entity having the biggest boat in the ocean, which right now is petroleum. So, the idea is to support everybody. Everybody makes a living, and we make our quality of life better, and we can address climate change solutions at the same time.
Well, great. Well, we're coming up on our next break, and we'll get back to Kelly King from Pacific Biodiesel and find out a lot more. Maybe talk a little bit more about the people that work for and the future of Pacific Biodiesel. So we'll be back in a few seconds right after this break.
Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, asking you to come join us on Think Tech Hawaii Hibachi Talk. Join me and my two hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Ender the Security Guy, every Friday from 12:45 till 13:45. See you on Fridays, and remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be.
Hey, welcome back to my lunch hour Friday. Stan, the Energy Man, here on Think Tech Hawaii. And I wanted to do a little plug here. I was walking through one of my favorite stores and saw this on the newsstand, and thought I got to read that, because that's all about Hank Rogers, our own Hawaii-grown entrepreneur himself. And it's a long article, but it's a great article. It gets into some of the details of how he got his business going and started over in Japan and over here, and the great things that he's doing with that. Those funds that he's managed to make in the big business world. And not only is he a really smart guy and a great coder, but he's a great entrepreneur and a great businessman and philanthropist. So I'd check that out if you have an inkling to go look at that magazine. It's a really good article. So we got Kelly King from Pacific Biodiesel back with us. And speaking of Hank and the Big Island and Blue Planet, are you doing anything with Blue Planet research over there with Paul Pontio on the Big Island?
Not directly. Paul's been to our refinery, and we've seen his operation up there at Hank's place, and so I think we're mutually supportive. He is part of the Waimea Nui Sustainable Community Project that we're part of. So, peripherally, we're all trying to build this model that can get Waimea, the community of Waimea on the Big Island first to 100% fossil fuel free. And it looks very doable, but not doing anything directly on his projects, but we are, mutually supportive and supportive of Blue Planet and what Hank has done. Although I used to curse him a lot when I first met him, because I was so addicted to Tetris. When I found out he was the one that brought Tetris to the America.
He almost got you off the business track because you're busy playing video games, huh? Well, he's a pretty remarkable guy, and he's like a pit bull on energy conservation and renewable energy. So it's great to work. I'd like to spend time with the Blue Planet folks. In fact, last Sunday I was on the Big Island with the folks at Waimea Nui and looking at their project as part of HCAT and looking at how the hydrogen piece and the transportation piece would fit in there. And there's a lot going on the Big Island. The Helion bus, H&EI is making a Helion bus for the Big Island with the county of Hawaii, and it's going to operate around the airport in Kona area. H&EI is also building a new hydrogen station at Nelha that they're going to be able to provide the fuel for the Helion bus, and also the buses that are going to Volcano National Park. So there's a lot going on your island in the hydrogen world. So I spend a lot of time over on the Big Island with those folks. But So
It's
what
actually
is,
not my island. I actually live on Maui, but we do have that operation over there. And I think I just missed you, Stan, because we were there Saturday night for that dinner, and we didn't make it back the next day for the working group meeting. But we did meet all the folks who are working on that Waimea Nui, from the Arizona State University folks that are helping with that.
yeah, they got a great tour of Blue Planet Research over there. It was awesome. I know you've been on that tour before, so you probably didn't miss much.
Yeah, and actually, just to give a little plug to Jeff Michelina, who's the executive director of Blue Planet, actually drives on 100% biodiesel with his car on Oahu. So they've been huge supporters of what we're doing as well.
Awesome. So speaking of the future, what's the future for Pacific Biodiesel? I mean, you're looking at cosmetics as with some of your new products on the Big Island coming out of your macadamia nuts, and you're looking at new feedstock that's going to grow your capacity to produce more biofuel. What else is on the horizon for Pacific Biodiesel?
Well, we're really excited about being part of this community project and hopefully being able to take this to other communities and build our part of the model in other communities. We're talking with about 3 tribes in South Dakota of the Sioux Nation who want to do biodiesel over there because they're already South Dakota and North Dakota are the largest growing sunflower states in the nation. And so they already have feedstock over there. But being able to help other communities do the same thing and build the model, it's the only way we're ever going to get to climate change solutions. And that's in the big picture. We'd like to see transportation devoid of fossil fuel and having a mix of all these different types of fuels. The biodiesel. I don't know that ethanol will ever get going here, but hydrogen certainly, possibly. Electricity and like that. And so we're really interested in being, and not looking at any one piece as a silver bullet, but being part of the mix. But I think the biodiesel portion, it has a lot of longevity because the diesel engine is going to be around for a long time. And when you build a diesel vehicle, you can expect it's going to be in use for about 30 years plus. So I was told years ago by the energy coordinator in the state, who under a different governor, that they saw ethanol as a short-term interim until electric vehicles get going, but they see biodiesel as long-term for industrial use. And so that's what we're trying to focus on is industrial use, the byproducts, the helping with get the cattle industry back into where it was in its heyday. It's only about 30% of where it used to be in its peak. And that largely has to do with the lack of meal. So it's hard to say. If we set a goal, and we used to do this on an annual basis, is do mission statement planning. We used to do strategic planning, and the goals would change every year because the industry changes and the focus would change back and forth from, we're going to go out and build more biodiesel plants. We built 13 biodiesel plants, one of them in Japan, the rest in the US, and most of them for clients. And now we're back to focusing really on providing fuel for Hawaii because we feel like that's the greatest need and where we can have the biggest impact. So it's hard to say what long-term, what we want to do, but the big scope of it, because that part of it, 5 years ago, we didn't understand the needs in the meal market here, in the feed market. And now we're all about that. It's hard to answer that with what is our goal in the long term, other than to have a large impact on sustainability, a positive impact, and collaborate with all the companies that are doing that in the state.
Well, I'd support that analysis on the transportation side. I think there's always going to be a need for diesel fuel, and my goal would be to increase your capacity, but then decrease the imported diesel fuel and move to all your stuff. Because when you look on the maritime side and you look at all the fishing boats that use diesel fuel, they use it for a reason, and the reason is it's really safe. On a boat, one of the scariest things you can have is a fire, and a gasoline fire is going to destroy your boat in a heartbeat, and it's so easy to kick off. A diesel fire is almost unheard of on a boat, and if you're using a cleaner diesel fuel like you produce, that would be perfect niche for the maritime side. I also pointed out to some folks that even though we stopped using locomotives and steam power, almost a century and a half ago, really, and we went to electric trains and diesel trains, we still produce more coal for power and energy than we did 200 years ago and 100 years ago. There's always going to be an increasing demand for energy, and the idea is to just clean it up as best we can using products like yours, and reduce the amount of fossil fuel we're taking out of the ground and just really kind of misusing, I think, including coal and things like that. So it's all an energy balance game, and you guys have a perfect entry and a perfect niche. You were the first ones there. Another first for Hawaii, thanks to Pacific Biodiesel. And it's just a great future. I know your company's got an outstanding future, and you've got some visionary leadership going, obviously, and I think you're going to do just terrific. So one of the last things I wanted to talk to you about was you folks got an award from Blue Planet Foundation, which is different from Blue Planet Research, but the Platinum Certificate for a Clean Fleet. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's really an awesome, that's a pretty prestigious honor.
Yeah, that was a program that just started up this year, and it was in conjunction with Honolulu Clean Cities. So they both sponsor this program together, and they started looking at, and hopefully this will go on every year, but they're looking at trying to influence renewable energy use in transportation, because we don't have a statute that applies to transportation yet. So the idea is to recognize the fleets on the ocean and on the ground that have done it without having to do it, without having a mandate. And what Blue Planet is doing is, they ask for applications, and if your fleet is on renewable energy, you can apply. Blue Planet will come in and do the assessment and look at the fuel that you're buying, and it's sort of like the LEED program. There's a platinum, there's the highest, and then gold, silver, and certified. And so if you're at 20% renewable, you can get certified. You can get a certified level, and then 50% is silver, 75% is gold, and 100% is platinum. And because our Pacific Biodiesel fleet of trucks that goes around and collects used cooking oil and does grease trap pumping is running on 100% biodiesel, every day of the week, we got the platinum level. And there was one other boat company that's running on Maui that's running on 100% biodiesel that got a platinum level as well, and out of the first 5 awards. So we were very, it's a great award to get. It's great recognition by Clean Cities and Blue Planet, and hopefully more fleets will. And it involves, it's electricity, it's hydrogen, it's whatever they're running on that's renewable. If the mix of when you compare it with the petroleum use is greater than 20%, then they can get the award. And there's also an offset. If they're not quite at 20%, they get extra points for energy efficiency. So they look at what you were doing 5 years ago, and if you've done steps to make your fleet more efficient, then you get points for that as well. So I was really happy that Blue Planet and Clean Cities stepped up together to do this program, and now we're able to say, to show people that, it's possible.
Well, you're doing a great job, and congratulations on that award from Blue Planet and Clean Cities. That's really awesome. And as a transportation guy, I'm looking to get as much going as I can in clean transportation myself. And I'm kind of agnostic. I love hydrogen, but as long as we're getting cleaner and greener, I'm a happy camper. So that, believe it or not, Kelly, gets us to the end of our show. And I really want to thank you again for being a guest on our show and doing what you do in our state to get us towards a cleaner environment, cleaner transportation in particular. So thanks for being with us, and
All right, thank you.
joining with us on Think Tech Hawaii. So I'm going to put on my Christmas hat, my Santa Claus hat,
Great.
and with all the camouflage, and say thanks for being with Stan the Energy Man and Kelly King from Pacific Biodiesel. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, because we're not doing one next week. It's Christmas. We'll see you in 2 weeks on Stan the Energy Man. Aloha.